My husband blindfolded me on my 35th birthday, told me he had a surprise, and left me at an abandoned gas station on the edge of Route 16. He drove away laughing with his friends. What he didn't know is that I never went home. 3 years later, he saw me again on the cover of a European financial magazine. I was standing next to the billionaire who had become my husband. My name is Claire Whitmore. And if you've ever been betrayed by someone you loved, if you've ever wanted to vanish and build something better from the ashes they might have buried you, but you didn't die, you were just planting roots. Before I take you through the moment I discovered the affair, the plan they made to humiliate me, and the exact second I decided to vanish, I want to ask, have you ever reached a breaking point? Have you ever wanted to disappear? Not out of weakness, but out of pure clarity. If so, you're not alone. And maybe this story is the permission you've been waiting for. Now let's begin. 3 days before my 35th birthday, I found the email that shattered everything. I was working late in our shared home office, sipping lukewarm coffee, trying to finish a budget report for a client. Emmett, my husband of 12 years, had gone to bed early. That alone was unusual. He was a night owl. But that night he'd claimed exhaustion from a big project at work. The desktop computer screen glowed softly in the dim room. I only needed to open a spreadsheet. But Emmett had left his email open. He never left it open. At first, I was going to close the tab and mind my business. That's what a trusting wife does, right? But the subject line caught my eye. Almost there. After this weekend, it'll finally be just us. The sender's name, Phoebe. I clicked, and then I couldn't stop scrolling. There were dozens of threads, hotel confirmations, inside jokes, photos I can never unsee. 3 years' worth of secrets exchanged behind my back while I cooked his meals, folded his shirts, and smiled at company parties. They called me the anchor, the reason they had to sneak around. They planned trips while I planned dinners, celebrated anniversaries while I packed his work lunches. I was shaking, literally shaking. But I didn't scream, I didn't cry. Instead, I forwarded every single email to a private address Emmett didn't know existed. Then I sat in silence for a long time. The anger didn't come right away. Neither did the sadness. What came first was emptiness. Like a house that had been quietly looted while I was sleeping inside. I couldn't believe how blind I'd been. And just when I thought I couldn't be more gutted, I heard the front door open. Emmett was home. I closed the browser and wiped my hands on my jeans. My heart pounded, but I stood and walked toward him like I always had. I greeted him with the same kiss I'd given him for over a decade. He didn't even blink. Working late again tomorrow, he muttered, not meeting my eyes. Big deadline. I nodded. Of course, honey, I understand. I didn't ask him questions anymore. Apparently, that made me clingy. That night I lay beside him in our bed, staring at the ceiling while he snored softly. The betrayal was sharp, yes, but deeper than that was a question I couldn't shake. When did I become invisible? I used to be bright. Ambitious Claire Whitmore was once a woman with plans before marriage, turned me into an accessory. I didn't sleep that night. By morning, I had only one clear thought: I deserved better than this. I just didn't know yet what better looked like. Not until the next day, when I got home from work early and found them all, Emmett, Phoebe, Finn, and Luca, lounging in my backyard, sipping the expensive bourbon I'd given Emmett last Christmas. That was the day I heard the full plan. Not just the affair, but the prank. The birthday surprise they were planning behind my back. It wasn't just a betrayal, it was a setup, one they thought would break me. They had no idea what it would really do. I stood just below the dining room window, crouched low, heart pounding in my ears. It was a warm Thursday afternoon. Our backyard, my backyard, should have been empty. Instead, Emmett was back early from work, lounging with his mistress and 2 closest friends, Finn and Luca, all sipping expensive bourbon on the patio set. I'd picked out myself. Phoebe was curled up against Emmett like she belonged there. She laughed easily like she'd been rehearsing her role for years. I held my breath and listened. So it's settled then? Finn asked, his voice already a little thick from the alcohol. The birthday surprise, Luca confirmed. You're really going through with it, Emmett chuckled darkly. It's perfect. We blindfold her, drive her around for a while, and drop her off at that old gas station off Route 16. He paused for effect. By the time she finds her way back, She'll get the message. Luca raised an eyebrow. You sure this isn't a little harsh? Oh, please. Phoebe cut in. She's been clinging so hard lately, always asking questions, always wondering where he's been. This will shake her up. And then, when he tells her he wants a divorce, she'll be too embarrassed to fight it. They all laughed. They were planning to humiliate me, to isolate me, to break me down, so I'd hand over 12 years of marriage without a fight. Finn raised his glass. To finally getting rid of the problem. Wife glasses clinked. I wanted to throw up. I slid down the wall, slowly pressing my back to the siding, breathing hard, eyes burning. They weren't just cheating. They were orchestrating my collapse like it was some kind of performance art. And Emmett, he wasn't the reluctant husband torn between two women. Like I'd once hoped he was the director of the whole show. That night when he came to bed reeking of bourbon and false promises, I stared at him in the dark. My hand brushed the curve of his back like it had 1,000 times before. But inside me something irreversible had shifted. I didn't want to confront him. I didn't want the truth. I wanted out. That night I stared at the open suitcase I'd hidden in the back of the closet. For 2 days I'd been tucking things inside, little by little: birth certificate, passport, my grandmother's necklace, a few old photos, the emergency cash I'd withdrawn $200 at a time. $5,000. All I had, it would have to be enough. The next morning, I acted like everything was fine. I made him coffee, kissed him on the cheek. Even asked about his day. He never suspected a thing. That evening, I cooked his favorite meal: roast beef with carrots and garlic potatoes. He devoured it, complimenting the flavors, smiling like a man who thought he was winning. After dinner, I asked casually, "So, will Finn and Luca be joining us for my birthday surprise tomorrow?" He paused just slightly. "Might be," he said. Why? I shrugged. It's been a while since we've all hung out. He didn't ask anything more. Later that night, I turned on the shower and made a phone call from the bathroom water, running loud to muffle my voice. I arranged for a private Uber to pick me up at the abandoned gas station at noon the next day. The driver hesitated when I gave him the location. "It's out in the middle of nowhere," he said. "I'll pay extra." He agreed. That night I lay in bed beside the man I had loved for over a decade, listening to the rise and fall of his breath. Calm, predictable. He thought he'd already won. But tomorrow he'd learn something about me he'd never expected. I wasn't the woman he thought I was. I was no longer the Claire he could break. The morning of my 35th birthday broke with golden light and silence. I woke before Emmett, quietly moving through the house like a guest about to check out for good in the kitchen. I made pancakes, his favorite strawberries and whipped cream, just the way he liked them. He came down the stairs wearing that smug little birthday grin, kissed my cheek, and said, "Happy birthday, babe. Got something special planned." I smiled. Can't wait. He didn't know it would be the last breakfast I ever made for him. At 10:50 a.m., I did one final walkthrough of the house. My suitcase was gone, already delivered to a storage locker downtown. My purse was packed. In my boot was a small roll of emergency cash. $800. My burner phone tucked beside it. Everything else, every dish picture frame, every scrap of the life I built in that house, I left behind. At 11 a.m. sharp, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Finn and Luca, grinning like frat boys with a secret "Happy birthday, Claire." Finn said, handing me a little gift bag. Inside was a silk scarf, deep navy, expensive, perfumed. I knew immediately what it was for. "It's beautiful," I said softly, running the fabric through my fingers. "Put it on," Luca suggested. "Emmett wants you blindfolded for the surprise." I turned to Emmett with a practiced smile. "Would you do the honors, honey?" He stepped behind me and gently tied the scarf over my eyes. His fingers rested for a moment on my shoulders. "You ready for the best birthday surprise of your life?" he whispered. I nodded, absolutely ready. They guided me into the car, arms around me, like some twisted version of affection. The ride was long, nearly 50 minutes. I counted every second under that blindfold, focusing on the rhythm of the tires, the direction of the sun through the windows, the scent of stale cologne and old leather. Finally, the car slowed. "We're here," Emmett announced. Someone opened the door. Gravel crunched beneath my feet as I stepped out. The air smelled of gasoline, rust, and dirt. I already knew where I was. Route 16's forgotten station, but I played along. "Ready for your surprise?" Finn asked. I can't wait, I answered, my voice even rough hands. Lucas probably spun me around 3 times, like it was a party game. Then the blindfold came off. The scene was exactly as I'd imagined, a gutted gas station with broken pumps and shattered windows. A weathered building that hadn't seen life in decades. Empty land in every direction, surprised they all shouted. Then burst into laughter like children who'd pulled off the world's greatest prank. I blinked at them, feigning confusion. I don't understand, I murmured. Emmett smirked. It's a test. To see if you're really as resourceful as you always claim to be. Finn waved my phone in the air. No cheating. You can't be serious, I said, letting my voice crack slightly. You're just going to leave me here, Luca chuckled. Don't worry, somebody'll drive by. Eventually, they backed toward the car. I took a shaky step forward. Emmett, please, I said, my voice trembling. Don't do this. It's my birthday. For a split second, his eyes flickered with something, maybe guilt, maybe just surprise at my desperation, but Finn clapped him on the shoulder. Come on, man, Emmett turned. Find your way home, Claire, he called out. We'll see you whenever. The car doors slammed. The engine roared. Dust kicked up into the sky as they disappeared down the road. I waited until their laughter faded into silence. Then I exhaled and let my face drop the act. I checked my watch. 11:47 a.m. My ride would be here in 13 minutes. I walked to the back of the building, knelt down, and pulled off my right boot. Inside was the roll of cash, tight, warm, and ready. From my oversized purse, I pulled out jeans, a gray t-shirt, a baseball cap. I changed quickly, stuffing the dress and heels into the bag. At exactly noon, a blue sedan appeared at the edge of the road, creeping up the gravel path. The window rolled down. The driver scanned the lot. Mrs. Layton, he called. I stepped forward, calm and unshaken. That's me, I said. Thanks for coming, he frowned. You sure you want to leave from here? More than you know. I slid into the back seat and didn't look back. Because Claire Whitmore just vanished. The ride into town was silent. The driver didn't ask questions, and I didn't offer answers. 20 minutes later, we pulled up in front of Marston Pawn and Collectibles, a small brick storefront tucked between a shuttered diner and a laundromat, the kind of place no one notices unless they're desperate. Perfect inside, it smelled like old velvet, metal polish, and secrets. Behind the glass counter stood Mr. Marston himself, early 70s. Tweed vest, half-moon glasses perched low on his nose. His fingers were knotted with arthritis, but his eyes were sharp. I stepped up to the counter and set down a small velvet pouch. He unfolded it slowly, one item at a time. My engagement ring, my wedding band, the emerald earrings Emmett gave me on our 10th anniversary, my grandmother's pearl necklace. He looked up at me, not with pity, but recognition. Family pieces, he asked gently. Some, I said. He nodded and didn't press. After examining everything, he named a figure. I can offer you $7,000. It's a fair rate. More than fair, actually, I nodded. Then he did something I didn't expect. He reached under the counter and placed something wrapped in brown cloth in front of me. I don't usually do this, he said softly, but a woman traveling alone needs protection. Inside the cloth was a small registered handgun. I stared at it. How did you know? I asked. He smiled faintly. 30 years in this business. I know the look of someone who's done being someone else's fool. I swallowed hard. Then I took both the money and the gun. He nodded once. Wherever you're going, I hope you never come back. I left the pawn shop and headed straight to the Greyhound station. Bought a one-way overnight ticket to New York City, paid in cash. No ID. The clerk didn't even blink. At 6:30 p.m., I boarded a half-empty bus and sat near the back baseball cap. Pulled low coat zipped up to my chin. I didn't sleep that night. I stared out the window as the Midwest passed in silence. Cornfields, power lines, rest stops glowing under dull lights. I kept expecting Emmett to come bursting through the bus doors, but of course he wouldn't. As far as he knew, I was still stranded and broken. He didn't know I'd already escaped him by dawn. We rolled into Port Authority. I stepped into the cold Manhattan air like a woman reborn. At a nearby internet cafe, I printed my boarding pass. One-way ticket to Paris via Reykjavik. Booked under Claire Layton. My maiden name paid in cash at a travel agency 2 weeks ago. I'd done my research. The less traceable, the better. By 2:00 p.m., I was through JFK security. No flags, no questions. In my purse was the cash. In a post office box in Paris was a package mailed 2 weeks earlier. Mr. Marston's gift carefully registered under a false name. At 4:45 p.m., the plane lifted off. As we climbed into the clouds, I pressed my forehead against the window and let myself cry, not from fear or regret, but from release. The Atlantic stretched beneath us wide and endless. Behind me, Emmett. The betrayal. The lies. Ahead of me, Paris. Uncertainty. Freedom. I arrived just past noon. Local time, a cheap hostel in Montmartre became my temporary shelter. Shabby walls, shared bathrooms. A narrow twin bed that creaked when I breathed. But it was mine, the first night I sat on the edge of that bed, listening to the city outside. Soft French voices, distant music. The scent of bread from a bakery below. I wasn't dreaming anymore. I had done it. The next day I bought a burner phone, walked to a pay station and checked the post office box I'd rented online under a fake ID. Inside the package from Mr. Marston, still sealed. Still waiting for the Claire I was becoming. The next few weeks were hard. My French was terrible, my savings. Even with the jewelry money were limited. Every euro mattered, but I moved like someone who had nothing to lose. I found a job posting for a receptionist at Lambert Financial, a small firm in the 8th arrondissement that needed an English speaker. At the interview, I gave them a sanitized resume, short, vague, safe, explained I was a quick learner. Organized, discreet, the woman behind the desk, Madame Rousseau, looked at me for a long moment before sighing. 3-month trial, she said. That night I took the long way back to the hostel, walking past the Seine, letting the breeze cut through my coat. I had a job. A name, a beginning. It wasn't glamorous, it was just real. And for the first time in years, I felt like Claire Whitmore again, whoever she was becoming. 3 months into my job at Lambert Financial, I was still answering phones and greeting clients. But something was changing every day before the office opened. I practiced my French under my breath. Bonjour, Lambert. Financial comment. Puis-je vous aider, Giselle? My supervisor was cool at first. Another American she probably thought taking a job a local could have filled. But she softened when she saw how hard I worked. How I stayed late. How I asked questions. One afternoon she winced as I butchered a client's name over the phone. After I hung up, she said simply, "Let me help you." We started having lunch together in the break room, her correcting my French between bites of baguette, me helping her write English emails. And slowly, I was building something. Not a facade, a life. One rainy Thursday, while sorting invoices, I noticed something strange. A client had been billed twice and paid twice. It wasn't my department, but it was a $40,000 error. I hesitated, then knocked on the glass door of the firm's founder, Philippe Lambert. He looked up surprised. I explained the mistake, gave him the invoice numbers, and showed him where it had happened. The next day, the firm recovered the funds, and I received a promotion. Philippe told me, "You have good eyes. We need that." As an administrative assistant, I had access to financial data, investment summaries, and client portfolios. And just like that, my world cracked open again. Numbers made sense to me, patterns, logic, forecasts. I devoured the reports I filed, studied them at night like textbooks. While others went home, I stayed late reading between the lines, learning not just how companies moved, but why they failed. 6 months into my new role, Lambert Financial was preparing a major strategy pitch. I was setting up the conference room when Philippa walked in with 2 senior advisors and asked Isabella, "Could you bring the Mercer file?" That's the name I went by now. Isabella Chin. My mother's maiden name. I retrieved the folder and paused. Something in the investment recommendation didn't sit right. They were pushing heavy investments into European telecom. But just last week, I'd read about new regulatory pressure and looming antitrust challenges. I hesitated at the door, then turned back. "Excuse me, but I think the timing on the telecom sector might be risky." The room fell quiet. Assistants don't speak up in strategy meetings, but I did. I told them where the report was. Which drawer? Which cabinet? Philippe stared at me. "You read everything that crosses your desk?" "Yes, sir. I find it educational." He dismissed me politely, and I spent the rest of the day sure I was going to be fired. But at 6 p.m., he called me back into his office. "How much do you know about financial markets?" he asked. "More than a receptionist, should I said. Less than I'd like." He offered me a position behind the scenes, analysis, data, support strategy prep. I said yes, and just like that, I stepped out of survival mode into something more. Weeks later, Philippe introduced me to a new client, Tanner Reed, CEO of Atlantic Meridian Shipping. He was sharp-polished, the kind of man who looked at problems like puzzles to solve. "Mr. Lambert says, you have a gift," he said during our first meeting. "Something about seeing what others miss." "I just pay attention to details," I replied. He smiled politely. At first, I supported from afar, running numbers, preparing summaries. Then one day during a meeting at the office, he tapped the page I'd given him. "You flagged our Mediterranean ports as high risk, explain. I did labor, unrest, regulatory changes, rising fuel costs." He listened. Really listened. 2 weeks later, those ports shut down in the largest shipping strike in 15 years. Atlantic Meridian had already shifted resources because of me. And that's when it happened. Tanner came into the office the next morning and said to Philippe, "I'd like to borrow Miss Chin for a special project." I became his direct consultant 1 day a week. Then 2. Eventually, I was spending more time at his Paris apartment than at Lambert's office. We worked side by side, spreadsheets, projections, negotiations. We talked business late into the night, but we never talked about the past. Until the market crash of 2023, banks collapsed. Panic spread. Companies were liquidating assets. Tanner's board wanted to sell. I told him not to. "This is the time to buy," I said. "If we move carefully, we could double our value." He looked at me long and hard. "If you're wrong, we lose everything. I'm not wrong." He trusted me. Within 6 months. Atlantic Meridian had acquired 6 companies for pennies on the dollar. When the market stabilized, their valuation had tripled. The financial press called it genius. Tanner knew better. One night, he poured 2 glasses of champagne and toasted to unlikely partnerships. I clinked my glass to new beginnings. And in that moment, on a balcony overlooking Paris, I realized I hadn't just rebuilt a life, I had built an empire. 3 years after the day I disappeared, I stood in a glass conference room on the 48th floor of a midtown Manhattan tower, reviewing a funding proposal for a struggling construction firm. The name on the file stopped me cold. Reynolds Construction. The company Emmett had inherited from his father. The same Emmett who left me blindfolded on a gravel lot, like I was nothing. Tanner walked into the room, setting down his coffee. "They're requesting international funding. But something's off. No confirmed contracts, just projections." I nodded slowly. "I know this company." Very well, he studied me. I told him the barest outline about a betrayal, a gas station, a vanishing act, but never the names. "Emmett Reynolds is my ex-husband," I said softly. "The one who planned the incident." Tanner's jaw tensed. "You want me to decline the meeting?" I looked down at the file again. A company drowning in debt, built on arrogance, and now desperate for a lifeline. "No," I said. "I want to be there. Not for revenge, for closure." The day of the meeting, I wore a tailored charcoal suit, hair pinned up. Pearl earrings Tanner had given me on our anniversary. I took my seat with my back to the door, papers spread neatly before me. When they entered, I didn't look up. Tanner greeted them first. "Thanks for coming. This is my strategic advisor, Isabella Reed." I slowly raised my eyes. Emmett froze. His skin went pale. His voice caught in his throat. "Ila," I offered a calm smile. "Mrs. Reed, actually, and yes, we've met." He stared at me like he was seeing a ghost, the woman he tried to erase, to reduce. Now sitting across from him, powerful, unshaken, untouchable. He stammered something about a missing persons report, about police searches. I didn't blink. "How unfortunate for you," I said simply. After the formalities, we declined the proposal. The numbers were weak, the contracts imaginary. As we stood to leave, Emmett whispered, "Why I met his eyes one last time. Because you left me blindfolded at a gas station. Because I overheard you plan to break me. And because now I know who I am." And with that, I walked away. Not as a victim, not as someone ruined, but as a woman who had built a life so full, so entirely her own, that the past no longer had a claim on her. And that was the sweetest revenge of all. What did you think of Claire's story? Was it the moment she stepped into that Uber, leaving everything behind? The way she rose from betrayal and built a new life in a foreign city? Or was it the look on Emmett's face when he realized the woman he discarded now held the power to decide his fate? Claire didn't scream, she didn't beg, she didn't fight dirty. She walked away, she rebuilt in silence, in strength. And that's the thing about quiet power, it doesn't make noise, but it shakes the ground beneath those who thought they'd broken you. So if you've ever been cast aside, humiliated, or underestimated, let this story be your reminder. You don't have to win their game. You can change the rules entirely. And sometimes, the loudest "I told you so" is simply living well without them. Let me know in the comments. If you were Claire, would you have revealed who you were in that meeting? Or walked out without ever looking back? If her journey moved you, please hit like, subscribe, and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. New true stories every single day, right here on EN True Tales.